This is Distant Replay, the podcast that goes back in time to relive all the greatest events that we witnessed in sports. From upsets, to championships, to cultural moments, we discuss it all. Coming up on today's episode.
We've got a one-possession game, the Illini, showing the heart of a champion. Throughout the season, when in trouble in the second half, they've managed to find another gear. Can they do it with time running out? There's on Ingram to bat the ball away. Williams to tie it with a three. He goes! Tied at 38 seconds to go.
Taking you back to March 26, 2005. It is the Elite Eight. It is one of the all-time classic college basketball games, tournament or regular season, whatever. You think about big games, really huge implications, two great teams, great rosters, just a classic game. You think about Illinois and Arizona 2005 NCAA Tournament. Welcome into Distant Replay. I'm Ben George. He's Mike Noto. And Mike, we went back to this game because we're trying to kind of sync up with the tournament as it goes on right now. And of course, Illinois this year was the 1 seed, and we expected them to make a really good run, but they've already been bounced out of the tournament by Loyola. But that's kind of why we thought, hey, let's find this Illinois game. But also along with that, this is just one of the best college basketball games you can watch.
So first off, with this year's Illinois team, I'm very surprised that they lost.
Yeah.
Very few times in the NCAA tournament am I surprised the team loses. With the makeup of that team, and the quality of player they had, led by a good coach, I am very surprised they lost, and in the fashion that they lost. But going on to this game now, very few times do the stars align where you get great venue, great teams, and they play well. And all the stars align for this Elite Eight matchup.
They did indeed. So we're going to take you through that today. We're going to take you back to that tournament, what was going on, how both teams got to this point. Illinois, this is their team. This is this is the greatest team in their program history. They just fell short, but this game was remarkable. It included a huge comeback and rally late in this when it seemed as so improbable. So we'll go through all that today. You can find this game. We'll put it up online if you want to watch it again for yourself. DistantReplayPodcast.com. Find us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Please subscribe, rate, and review. Spread the word. Tell a friend. Whatever it is, we appreciate all the feedback and all the growth, and we hope to continue to do that. So, Mike, we're going back to March 26, 2005. This was played at the All-State Arena, which I think most people would know this arena better as Rosemont Horizon. So, classic setting. I think the most important thing is you're talking about an Illinois team is playing in Chicago. So, as you can imagine, basically a home court advantage, huge home court advantage.
So you have the best team in program history, which this team was. They played the Big Ten tournament in Chicago. They're now playing the regionals in Chicago. So that's what I meant by the stars aligning. You have this Illini fan base now getting to enjoy this run very intimately, right? What I mean by that is, they're able to go to these games. They're able to hang out in the bars around these venues, before and after the game. And it really becomes a unique experience for a fan base that, although Illinois has a very storied basketball tradition, there's not many comets like this that come from Illinois basketball where they're as dominant as they were this season.
No, and this is a great era. I mean, this is the era of, I think, Illinois basketball. They had a really good 80s with Lou Henson, right? They made some pretty good runs. They were in the tournament almost every year, but they're coming off of Bill Self, who was there for 3 years, got him the Elite Eight, Sweet 16, and then now Bruce Weber in his second year already went to the Sweet 16 once, now has his best team. So, everything's kind of been snowballing to this moment, right? So it feels like, hey, this team is legitimately a national championship team that we think is going to win it all. I mean, they only lost one game all season. When you look at that schedule, and they mentioned this in the broadcast, they were undefeated against top 25 teams. Their only loss of the season came in the very final game of the year, regular season-wise, at Ohio State. They lose by 1 point. So you're talking about a team that was dominant throughout. I mean, even in the Big Ten tournament, this team basically just ran the table and made teams look bad throughout the year.
Yeah, they were really a perfectly put together team. And they're one of these first teams I could remember that featured 3 guards. So Luther Head, Deron Williams, and Dee Brown. If you remember anything about this team, you remember that 3-headed monster at guard.
Oh, yeah.
And they were one of the first teams I could remember that really centered their offense around not only the three guards, but around the three-point shot, okay? And they happened to have knockdown shooters everywhere, okay? And you couple that with Deron Williams, who you could tell even from at this point in his career was going to be a very good pro. You had veteran leadership in Luther Head. You had the speedster in Dee Brown, and you had Roger Powell and James Augustine rounding out the starting five, just solid quintessential role players. And I mean, I thought it was unique they're playing Arizona because the other three-headed guard sort of trio I think about when I think of college basketball is I think of Bibby, Simon, and Terry. Yeah. Well, with this Illinois team, you sort of had a better version of that trio. They're all a little bit bigger. I think as a whole, they were all better shooters. And I think although that Arizona team ended up winning the championship, I think this Illinois team was just as much as good as that team.
Yeah, I was reading a story on Grantland, which is no longer around, but the kind of long-form writing site. There's a good one about this game and this Illinois team. But Bruce Weber said that one of the big moments was a couple days into his time at Illinois when he just got the job. He said those three guards came into his office and said, hey, we want to play together. We want to be on the court together at the same time. We want to start together. And because Weber came from this background of the Missouri Valley where, three guard lineups were pretty normal for him. He didn't think it was that big of a deal. Thought it could be fine. Yeah, we can make this work. And he did. So they kind of hit like a low point that season, but they lost about 20 to Wisconsin the year before. And then from that point forward, like everybody settled in and the system was kind of all systems go. They rolled off 25 straight Big Ten wins into this season and everything was clicking. So you're exactly right. Like those three guys, when you think about Illinois, still to this day, when I think about Illinois, I think about Dee Brown and I think about Deron Williams.
And listen, if you look at what this team was a precursor to in college basketball, I mean, the makeup of it, I think you saw in very, very short order after this team, you saw Villanova sort of take this to the next level in terms of being small, shooting threes. And I think it's become a mainstay in how college teams are built. If you don't have a solid big man or a scorer inside, this is how college basketball teams are built. And I think this team had a very big part in that.
Yeah, no question. So that lineup obviously was much more recognizable than Arizona. And you go over to Arizona's side, Pac-10, Lute Olsen, head coach, they're in the midst of an incredible run. They at this point, Arizona is one of the the top 5 programs in college basketball. They've been there up and down, over the last 15 years since this game. But, I think at this point, they're coming off the championship not too long before this. They're in the tournament every single year under Lute Olsen, right? And they're typically in the second weekend at least, occasionally getting into that Final Four. But this team, you look on paper, we talk about Illinois. We know everybody on this Illinois roster just about. But you look on the other side, there's only a couple of names that I truly remembered off this Arizona team. Obviously, Channing Frye played a huge game in this one, but was a very good player for Arizona. And then Salim Stoudamire, because anytime you see a Stoudamire in an Arizona jersey, like it automatically clicks. That name is synonymous with Arizona. Yeah,
a Stoudamire wearing number 20 who's a lefty. So if any of you are at least remotely familiar with Arizona basketball history, Damon Stoudamire, one of the most popular players in program history, the cousin of Salim Stoudamire, was also a lefty and wore number 20. So that sticks out, like you said. Channing Frye, you could tell, was like the pro guy from this team, right? Like you could tell Deron Williams was the pro guy from Illinois. Yeah. You could tell Channing Frye was going to be the guy who would emerge to be the best pro from this Arizona team. Shakur, I remember. Hassan Adams, I remember. But if you put me on the spot and said, hey, 2005 Arizona, probably the only names I'd be able to name off the top of my head before watching this game was Stoudamire and Frye.
Yeah, Stoudamire is a cousin of Damon Stoudamire, the one that we probably know a little bit better. But Salim, I think his season this year in 2004, 2005 gets overlooked. He was an incredible shooter. He shot over 50% from three. 50% from three. And that's, I know the lines moved back a little bit, so it's a little bit deeper of a shot now. But, it's unheard of to see a guy that shoots with that much volume. He averaged 18 points a game to shoot at that level.
You hit it on the head. Shoots with a lot of volume, is not overly big. No. It's not like we're talking about one of these guards that's 6'6", 6'7", and it's easy for him to get off his shot. running the offense at the same time. So yeah, very impressive under the radar season by Salim Stoudamire. And when I say under the radar, I probably Pac-10, Pac-12, and Arizona fans remember it. But just like for the casual college basketball fan, very under the radar, good, very good season.
Yeah, because that year J.J. Redick was at Duke, so when you think shooter, Redick got all the headlines, right, as being the best shooter by far. But when you look at the numbers that Stoudamire put up throughout the year, he was in that. He should have been in that conversation week in, week out. And I'm sure he was at the time during the year. But now, as time progresses, you don't think back to that year as much by him. And maybe because they didn't make a deep run of the tournament in terms of like getting to the Final Four and getting to that next level. But he was really good, and this team was really good as well. And you go back and watch this game, it's surprising the way they played in this game that they were a 3 seed. Like it felt like you were watching a 1 versus 1.
Look, Illinois is the headliner because of all the reasons I mentioned before. Playing in Chicago, all the players being from Illinois except Deron Williams, best team in program history. But the reason this game is a classic is because Arizona brought it. Arizona played awesome in this game.
Yeah.
And raised their level to the level of this legendary Illinois team. And that combination just led to a classic.
Yeah, what was so great is, you had two teams that were playing at a high level. It wasn't, Illinois came out slow and then Arizona took advantage. And both these teams played maybe their best game, right? They both put their best effort on the court. And then, the best team eventually won it. But you look at this tournament, let's take you quickly through how both teams got here. So Illinois, obviously a 1 seed with only 1 loss through the season. They were actually only up 1 point at halftime of their first game against Fairleigh Dickinson, the 116 matchup. They won that game by 12, Mike, which actually was their closest margin of victory until this Arizona game was at 116. And a lot of coaches will tell you, just get through that opening round game, right? Just get past that first game. Oftentimes that's your hardest. They beat Nevada, the 9 seed, and they beat Milwaukee. Bruce Pearl's Milwaukee team that advanced to the Sweet 16. They beat them there before playing against Arizona. And then for the Wildcats, they beat Utah State in the first round. Then they got UAB in round 2, who had upset LSU. And then they had a classic against Oklahoma State where they had Stoudamire hit a last-second shot essentially to win that game by a point over the 2 seed Oklahoma State team.
Yeah, and so this game would completely overshadow that Arizona-Oklahoma State game, but that was a classic as well.
Yeah, it was. So that sets the stage kind of where we are. Anything else pregame, Mike, that you think's important to mention here?
With Luther Head's injury, the hamstring injury that they refer to the rest of the game, I think it's important to mention that He has that injured hamstring. Just a little bit about Rosemont Horizon. There's certain venues that I equate with being college basketball venues, right, in different areas of the country. And in the Midwest, when I'm thinking Chicago and a college basketball specific venue, Rosemont Horizon is what I think of. And I love when games like this are played in classic college basketball arenas rather than those generic, huge dome stadiums. Yeah,
I think most people would agree with you. NCAA might not because they don't make as much money, but this is actually a pretty big venue in terms of seating. This 17,000, 18,000 people here. And, you still had the old look where you had the home team's floor down there. So you had DePaul, their logo, everything there. But, yeah, I agree. This was a fun one to watch, and especially in a time when, we see 4,000 or 5,000 fans at a game right now. Just to go back in this one, the crowd actually played a huge part in this, and this is why you want to be a top seed, because you get that advantage of playing closer to home where your fans can travel. And this was just an awesome venue, awesome place to play. And just the atmosphere for this one was top notch, as you would expect. Again, to your point, the stars aligning. You have a team that isn't in this position all the time. They were kind of in this era, but they aren't, a team that's going to be in the tournament and expect to be in the tournament every single year, like the top notch teams. So having this team being so good in your backyard is just, man, this was the place to be in Chicago that night, I'm sure.
Absolutely. We talk a lot on this podcast about if you're a fan of this team, this is the moment for you. And if you're a fan of Illinois basketball, I believe this is the moment.
You want to hit on coaches real quick. So we mentioned Lute Olsen on one side, Bruce Weber on the other. Obviously two very good coaches in their own right. Weber had a pretty nice run at Illinois. Lute Olsen's the headliner here. And he was so, watching him coach in this game, he's just so calm and collected on that sideline. You compare him to a lot of coaches today that are just so animated and fired up. he didn't seem like he ever got two up or two down, ever.
Yeah, Lute Olsen, very comfortable in his own skin. A legendary coach. We did a whole episode on the Arizona-Kentucky National Championship game from 1997, very soon after Lute Olsen passed last year. So if you're interested in that, go check that out. But Lute Olsen's the headliner here. Weber, one of these coaches who, hey, look, from a coaching standpoint, this team is what he's best known for. I think Weber's a solid coach, a solid college basketball coach.
Okay, fair enough. So that's your matchup going into this game. This game obviously on CBS. We had Dick Enberg and Jay Billis on the call for this one.
Great sort of stars aligning kind of broadcast here, right? I mean, Dick Enberg, one of the better just play-by-play guys, period, ever. Jay Billis, I mean, if you're a college basketball fan the last 20 years, I think you respect what he brings to the table, both as an in-game analyst and a studio analyst. I just had forgotten that he used to do the NCAA Tournament regional sites like this and work at ESPN. He used to do both. I forgot about that. And then Armin Katayan on the sideline, again, pro's pro as well. So, again, I keep on using the term stars aligning, but everything aligned in this game.
Yeah, this was Billis with hair. He still was rocking the hair back then. But, yeah, this was before he kind of really became the top, what's the lead basketball guy at college basketball guy at ESPN in terms of analysts. I mean, Dick Vitale obviously on game calls, but Billis kind of does it all, studio, games, and obviously when he moved on to college game day basketball, they pretty much locked him up there at ESPN for good. But he's great on these calls as an analyst on these broadcasts, and he delivered in this game as well. He speaks so well. He sees the game, can break it down for you, and it's just a great listen. So this game, really, really fun from that respect in terms of you can actually learn during this broadcast, and these guys are tied into what's happening. So a lot of fun to watch this one and go back to it. So let's get into it, Mike. In this broadcast as we watch, not a lot of ancillary stuff. It's just all game, right? It's these NCAA March Madness YouTube channel. Really, it's literally action. You don't get any bumps to break. You don't get any pregame. You don't get any halftime. None of that. It's just all action. So we don't get as much outdated stuff in this, but we do get all the games. So, and it makes it quicker to watch if you want to quickly go through this one. So as we expect, Mike, great atmosphere, electric coming in. Kind of interesting start because Illinois jumps out, quick start, right? I think 8-0 or 6-0, and then Arizona responds, going on a 12-2 run, and it kind of sets stage for what's going to happen this entire game. Both these teams are locked in, and it's not where one of these two teams is kind of struggling out of the gates. They're both just playing at a very, very high level. They're both playing at a high level, both going about their strategy in a totally different way. What I mean by that is, in the first 9 minutes of the game, Illinois has 5 3-pointers, Arizona has 0. And on the flip side, Arizona has 6 free throws made and Illinois has 0. So the way they're going about it is different. Illinois more from downtown, Arizona more from inside. But again, we're getting the same end result. We're seeing just very good basketball being played. And there was one key sequence I thought happened at the end of the half that played a big role in this game staying close into the second half. Did you have anything in between, like the beginning of the first half and that end of that first half? Not a ton. I mean, you had, I think Hassan Adams playing really well in this game. Yeah, he kind of made an impact. Stoudamire's just, he's there and he's doing, you can kind of tell he's controlling things. He's not shooting great early on. He's like the one guy at this point that's not shooting at a high level. Everybody else is kind of is playing well, and he's kind of not yet. But no, I mean, it's kind of just a back and forth. It's a really well played game right now. Yeah, you would see Channing Frye and Hassan Adams would sort of really be major factors in this game. Mm-hmm. And I agree with your take on Stoudamire. The key sequence, I thought, at the end of the half, Illinois was up 36-29. The crowd was really into it, and it looked like this might be the point where Illinois would pull away. And I thought it was really key. Arizona kept the game close and cut it to 2 to end the half. So at halftime, we're at 38-36. Arizona has 20 points in the paint. Again, just hitting on what I was mentioning before. Stoudamire has 0 field goals in the first half. Mm-hmm. And Deron Williams, although he's showing some flashes and making some great plays, he has 5 turnovers in the first half. Yep, very good point. I mean, Frye's the guy that you watch so far in this game, and he's a guy that kind of stands out among this whole group. But I mean, Dee Brown obviously running that offense is still fun to watch. Yeah, he's not going to get as involved in scoring typically, but he's just all over the place. But I thought it was always funny watching. It's always different, at least maybe not funny, different going back and watching these guys with the baggier uniforms. I don't know if it just seems like they're not as athletic or they just have different body types, but it's just such a different look watching these guys in these bigger uniforms. Like even Deron Williams, compared to what we see now with these guys that are bringing the shorts back up, everything's skin tight. It's like watching a different product.
Yeah, that's the one thing that's outdated in this game, I guess, when you compare it to now.
Yeah,
that we can point out is the uniforms. And yeah, the Illinois backcourt, I mean, it was so unique how they all brought different skill sets. Dee Brown was a burner, right? Just very quick with the ball. Deron Williams was just a playmaker. True pro, You knew it from the first second you saw him. He was going to be a playmaker and a pro. And Luther had kind of the steadying presence and the veteran presence, and Luther had also the leading scorer on this team heading into this game.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't think that if you went back and just said, hey, he's the leading scorer. Probably would say Williams, but yeah, head at the top of that. So that was the first half. So you might mention 38-36 at halftime. And then Arizona just took it to a different level in the second half. And keep in mind, like you're playing basically on the road right now in a crowd that I swear, whenever Arizona makes big plays, you barely hear anything, Mike. And then when Illinois is getting buckets, the place is going bonkers. So you think about that in that moment and picture that when this Arizona team comes out of that second half. I don't know what Lute Olsen told them at halftime, and maybe that run to end the first half kind of helped. But they come out and they're on fire. I mean, there's no they're hitting almost every single shot. Literally, they quickly go up 6 early in that half. And as that first half's kind of going through, you're midway through. They throw up a graphic, and Arizona's shooting nearly 70% from the field in the second half. And you're just going, I mean, okay, what can Illinois do about this? This is Arizona just playing above their head.
Yeah, look, you have the steadying presence of Olsen, getting them right at halftime. You have Stoudamire not doing much from a point standpoint, but staying engaged in the game and leading them. And then you have Frye and Hassan Adams playing very well in the second half. So they're really the two players that led this charge for them to increase the lead. So where we're at here is with 6 minutes left, Arizona goes up 12, all right? Now you have a crowd that's stunned, and one of the big reasons they're stunned is this is the first time all season that Illinois has trailed by more than 9 points, which I thought was a crazy stat.
Yeah. You think about it, I mean, there's going to be at some point your team just, comes out flat, distracted, another team is just on fire and goes on a run, and, next thing you know, you're down 10 or 12 points, and you come back because you're a really good team. But the fact that they had never been in that position all year is crazy. And I'm like you, Mike. I'm taking down notes. Okay, so we know Illinois is going to pull this thing off, and I'd kind of forgotten how big this comeback was and how improbable the comeback was. But I'm taking notes. Okay, so Zona's up 70-58 with 6 minutes left. Okay, Arizona's up 73-60 with 5 minutes left, and like progressively as we get deeper into this game, like the lead is increasing, and I'm sitting there going, okay, at what point does this all of a sudden change? Because there's no signs of it happening. I mean, Illinois is playing okay, they're playing fine, but just Arizona's doing everything right. They're controlling the ball, they're getting good shots, they're making their shots, they're not fouling a lot. I mean, it's a very, very well played, clean game. Well officiated. We talk about the officials a lot in this show, but we should point out that when they do a good job, you don't notice them. It's a great thing to watch, which was the case here. But I'm just sitting here waiting, like, what's going to happen? Because you're talking about a 14-point lead with 4 minutes left, under 4 minutes. I mean, in that spot, it's almost a no-brainer. It's never going to be a comeback. I don't care how good Illinois is. You don't expect that to ever happen.
You're exactly right about the refs. First of all, they did a great job in this game. Because again, we blast refs on here all the time, so it's important to know when a game where they do a good job. So I was doing the same thing you were in my notes, keeping track of the lead, and I was kind of like those memes where you see the eyes going back and forth between like the game, the time, and the score. I mean, like, when is this going to turn around? So to build on what you said, Arizona's up 15 with 4 minutes left. Arizona's up 7 with 1 minute and 20 seconds left, and they're up 8 with 1 minute left. And that there was a 15-second span from 1 minute left to 45 seconds left that really got Illinois back in this game, and you started to think, man, they might actually come back.
Well,
And
I'll even take you. I'll back you up even a few more seconds before that, Mike, because before you get into this, because this is obviously a huge point. I even thought there was a bigger moment right before this with like a minute and a half left when, Arizona's up by 9 with the ball, and they're kind of just running the shot clock down. And there's kind of a bit of a lazier pass. They got intercepted and it turned into an easy layup for Illinois. I thought that possession seemed to me, you have a chance to go up double digits under 90 seconds left. I mean, it's just all a foul and free throw shooting competition at that point. I was surprised when that moment happened, but I thought, okay, that kind of keyed everything.
As a whole, the one thing Arizona probably regrets in this game, although they played great, was they probably wish they would have been a little bit more aggressive down the stretch trying to score the ball and kept to the same offense they were running all game that was productive. That's probably the one regret they have. But that 15-second span I'm talking about, that Illinois is down 8 with 1 minute left. You have a three-pointer by Head. You have a steal and lay-in by Brown. Okay, so we just went from an 8-point lead to a 3-point lead for Arizona in 15 seconds. Then we had a timeout. Coming out of the timeout, we have a steal by Williams, a three-pointer by Williams. Sorry, a steal out of timeout, a 3 by Williams ties the game, and the crowd is going nuts at this point. Illinois is on a 17-3 run the last 2 minutes and 48 seconds. We got the crowd doing the ILLINI chant, which if you've ever watched an Illinois game, you know what I'm talking about. And it's amazing that we had an 8-point lead literally 15, 20 seconds ago, and now it's a tie ball game.
It happened so quick, man. It really did. I mean, you're sitting there. If you look away at all, you're going to miss a big moment down the stretch. I mean, everything just on a dime just changes. And you talk about Arizona, like Josh Pastner, who was an assistant for Arizona at the time, now at Georgia Tech. He was even saying, like, you're sitting there on the bench going, we're about to head back to the Final Four. Like that's where their mindset was. And this avalanche of plays by Illinois and made baskets and threes. And next thing you know, it's tied up at 80. But the crazy thing is they don't score. Neither team scores in the final 30 seconds. And both teams had an opportunity. And then the last possession by Arizona, they had a chance. And I hate these shots at the end of games, Mike. And you're probably in a similar case where you have time and you're tied, especially in a situation like this. You're tied. And you settle for kind of a step back three, contested three. I just never get why you don't go to the basket and put the pressure on the defense. I'll never understand that.
You know what it is, Ben? From being a coach in these situations numerous times, the mistake coaches make, and I made it a lot, was you tell your team, don't give them enough time to take the ball and get a shot on the other end, right? It's sort of playing passively, but I think what happens when the players have that in their mind, they start the clock late and getting moving, going towards the hoop. And if that initial move to the hoop is not open, you end up with a shot that looks really bad. I think that's it, and it's a tough situation either way, but I get what you're saying. It just looks like non-fluid, and it looks like there's no plan.
Yeah, and it was a bad shot. And we go to overtime, so no points there. And then, Arizona's shell-shocked at this point. You go into overtime, Illinois comes out, and they jump right on them, right? They continue this run. They get a 6-point lead. But, Arizona doesn't give up. I mean, it's back and forth, and even cuts it to 1 point with 30 seconds or so left, and they're right back in it. But I kind of felt in that most of that overtime period like this is Illinois' game. I mean, after what you just saw and then the way they get off to a quick start in overtime, it's just almost impossible to overcome that.
This is what I'll say. In normal situations like this, again, given all the circumstances we said before about where the game's being played, the legendary Illinois team, Williams coming out to start the overtime with 2 3-pointers on top of the 3 he just had in regulation to tie the game, okay? Then we have a steal and a bucket by Luther Head to put them up 90-84 with 2 minutes left. You think at this point, Arizona gave a good effort, but they're probably going to go away now. This happens a lot in these overtime games where the team who has the momentum coming out of regulation just kind of steamrolls. I'll give Arizona a lot of credit. They did not go away. And this is a 1-point game with 11.8 seconds left, and Arizona has the ball.
What's crazy to me too is in both the regulation and overtime, neither team scores in the final 30 seconds. I mean, I think about these games a lot, and the final 30 seconds in many cases can take 5 minutes when it's back and forth like this. And I know that when it's a 1-point game, you don't have all the fouling and stuff. But for neither of these teams to score in the final 30 seconds, you had everything else in this game, but like a last-second shot or like a final possession, bucket to win it. That's the only thing this game missed.
Yeah, after that flurry that I described by Illinois at the with a minute left in regulation, after the three by Williams at the end of that timeout, you're right. There's like this weird lull where there's no scoring and we just go to overtime. And the same thing happened in overtime. What did you think of Arizona's last possession they had? Again, it was a 1-point game with 11.8 left. What did you think about that last possession?
About the same as I thought in regulation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a shame that such a good game ended with a bad last possession. It seemed like they wanted to clear out for Adams, but they didn't clear it out enough for him. It seemed like what their plan was, and just kind of a rush shot by Adams from long, from three, and that was it. But just a classic game with a bad last possession. But that doesn't take away at all from the game because it was a classic.
It was a classic, and Illinois survived to go on to the Final Four and pulled that game off 90-89 in overtime. And you look at the breakdown, Illinois first half outscored Arizona by 2. Arizona outscored them by 2 in the second half, and it was a 1-point game in overtime. So, I mean, it just kind of shows you, sure, there was a lot in between that, but bottom line, these two teams were about dead even this night. But Illinois, I think, behind that home crowd, was able to overcome and pull this thing out and win by a point. And you look at the rest of this tournament, Mike, we finally got in this NCAA tournament the championship I think everybody wanted, which was Illinois versus North Carolina. The two clear best teams, right, that season. This was the championship game I think everybody was excited to see, and it still delivered. The unfortunate part for Illinois is no matter how good they were that year, and only had one loss all season up until that Final Four, unable to finish it off. And it kind of goes to show you how difficult it is to put together a full season. I mean, it wasn't a perfect year, but they only had that one defeat by 1 point. And then still, you had a Big Ten championship to show for it, but still, I think ultimately you missed that big prize. It's not a failure, but I think it's still like we didn't quite accomplish what we wanted to.
Yeah, again, the fact that they didn't win a national championship, like you said, doesn't take anything away from how great they were leading up to that. But this season, I could remember like these two teams being the best two teams that year, and you were kind of hoping they would meet in the national championship. And I remember that final game, UNC I think was up pretty big at half, and Illinois tried to make a comeback, but they just couldn't do it. But look, for a program like Illinois, making it to the championship game is a big deal. I know they didn't seal the deal, but again, that North Carolina team, I mean, we're talking about a North Carolina team, just to refresh your memory, with Raymond Felton, Sean May, Rashad McCants, Jawad Williams, Jackie Manuel, and Melvin Williams coming off the bench. So
Marvin Williams, yeah.
Marvin Williams, sorry.
Yeah.
Marvin Williams coming off the bench.
One of their
and
great
if you forget Sean May that year, so what made a big difference in that game, if you remember, was that Illinois, great from the outside, but Sean May was dominant on the inside, and he crushed Illinois in that game. So he was 10 for 11 with 26 points and 10 rebounds. And that was Sean May's tournament. If you think about the tournament as a whole, and I tell you North Carolina won, you're going to think Sean May, and then you're going to think this Illinois team. Yep,
pretty much. That's it. And you look at what these two programs have done since. I was kind of surprised with Illinois, and I know this year, this 2020-2021 season has been a huge year for Illinois up until this tournament, this early exit. I'd kind of forgotten, how much of a lull the program had been into. I know that a lot of the early, like around 2010, that time period has not been great for this school. But you go back and look at what they did. This is the last time, this 2005 is the last time that Illinois made it out of the first weekend of the tournament.
Yeah, and I think Weber was there till about 2012, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And then they've been getting. Then they went through a little bit of a dark period since Underwood was hired. Since Brad Underwood was hired, they've been getting progressively better.
Yep.
culminating obviously in this season where, again, I think they were one of the 2 or 3 best teams in college basketball, but, it just didn't work out that way in the tournament. So I think they're headed in the right direction now. We'll see what the coming years bring.
Yeah, it's just interesting because you think back of how good when we growing up, Mike, Illinois was a really good basketball program. Every year, from you go back and you look from like 1980 to 1980 to like this year essentially, and even Bruce Weber's tenure, they only missed the tournament, 5 to 6 years. They were in it every year, but it's been the exact opposite since that point. So kind of interesting to go back and look at that. But I agree that Brad Underwood's got that program rolling, and when he took over, this is a team that was winning 15 to 18 games a year, and then he comes in, and now the last couple of years they've progressively gotten better. So they're in much better shape. For Arizona, we kind of know what they've been. Lute Olsen, he would coach a couple more years after this, and they kind of handed off. Sean Miller eventually took it over after a couple coaches in between. The program really hadn't dropped off a whole lot, Mike. I think now kind of under a cloud of sanctions a little bit is kind of where they are currently. But I think Miller's kind of picked up where Lute Olsen left off, and they haven't gotten to that. They haven't won the big one again, but they've kind of been on the cusp a lot.
Yeah, you know what? It's one of those things where Sean Miller and Lute Olsen do it in 2 totally different ways. Sean Miller's kind of a madman. Lute Olsen's a little bit more quiet about it. And I think you see how hard it is, though, at Arizona to win consistently year after year after year. I think the height of the Lute Olsen era, player-wise, surpasses what Sean Miller's been able to do. I'm interested to see after these sanctions if he can ever get the program back up to where it was before the sanctions or before the cloud or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, if he even gets an opportunity to. We'll see how that all plays out. But I guess no question who the best pro in this game was, Mike, who ended up being the best pro.
Yeah, Deron Williams was the best pro. I'm trying to think who had pro careers of note here. Channing Frye has. I think Channing Frye's still in the NBA.
Yeah, he's had a long career.
Yeah, he had a good career. Yeah, those are the only 2 that really had NBA careers of note.
Hey, you go back to this game, Frye even said, like, this game made him a lottery pick. When you go back and look at it, he said he even jokes with Deron Williams. He thanks him for this game because it made him a lottery pick. He went for 24 and 12 and 6 blocks, and he scored 24 points on 14 shots. I mean, super efficient. Adams had 21. I think that the biggest issue for Arizona in this game was Stoudamire. He only had 9 points. If Stoudamire has even an average game for him, he shot 2 for 13, one of 7 from 3. And if he even has an average game in this one, they win the game. He was the only guy that kind of lacked. He didn't play awful, but he just wasn't shooting like he normally does, and I think that was the difference.
Yeah, that's a good point regarding Stoudamire, and I agree with that. Who knows if it would have led to them winning the game, but it could have played out a little bit differently. And Channing Frye, drafted, of course, in the lottery, number 8 by your New York Knicks. So
yeah, not much of a career with the Knicks, though.
No, only 2 seasons. Anyone who shows any slightest bit of promise during that era, we just found some way to talk ourselves into getting rid of him. So, but no, he had a solid rookie season. Not so good second season with the Knicks, and then obviously, why give a 23-year-old another year to develop, right?
Right.
But with that said, he never averaged more than 12.5 points a game in any one season in his career. So he's had a long career, but definitely has not met like being a lottery pick kind of status. But solid pro, and again, outside of Deron Williams, second best pro from this game.
Absolutely. So that'll be a wrap for this episode of Just a Replay, going back to 2005. Because I don't think there's a whole lot out data we can even mention, Mike, because we don't get a whole lot with this game. I did think the one thing that annoyed me throughout this game was the watermark score bug in the upper left, because there was only one other game being played in the Elite Eight. It stayed up the entire game with the same score.
So that game, West Virginia Louisville, I can tell you won in overtime. Because the score bug was, again, in the top left of the screen the whole game. Was that the Kevin Pittsnoggle, Mike Gansey team?
I was going to say, it has to be the Pittsnoggle team. But I'm pulling it up right now. But, yeah, that's the first thing I thought I was. Man, that's when West Virginia, like, they were kind of not a team you thought about a whole lot in basketball. But then, like, they just kind of exploded onto the scene under Beeline. And, yeah, that team had Pittsnoggle leading the way. He was a junior that year.
So that's where the country gets introduced to John Beeline, a large majority of the country, right? Gets introduced to John Beeline, gets introduced to Kevin Pittsnoggle and Mike Gansey. And most importantly, introduced to a team of guys wearing T-shirts under their jerseys. That's what I did. Mike Gansey, big T-shirt under the jersey guy.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that was West Virginia's
some run
first.
They went on.
Yeah, that was their first real run. That was Beeline's third year there.
Yeah, that's a team. If you know someone who's of a certain age and they follow college basketball, they'll remember that team in 2 seconds, and mainly because of Pittsnoggle.
Yep, no question. But that
He
scorebook
averaged 20. He almost averaged 20 a game that year, dude.
He's pretty good. Pretty good.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a wrap on this one. Let's close it out on that note, Mike. Fun to go back to this one. One of the classic college basketball tournament games. Unfortunately, Illinois, who we thought would probably still be in it at this point, we did the show, but neither one of these teams in the current NCAA tournament. But I have no question they'll both be back very, very soon, and hopefully if they do meet again, we'll get something similar to this.
Absolutely. Again, both these programs will be back, but this was still a great one to look back on, and I'm really glad we did it, and we'll see you guys next time.